Welcome to Good Mike Works Pay-Per-View and DVD Reviews Volume 13. This week we're going to take a look at Royal Rumble 1992. You guys are actually going to get two pay-per-view reviews out of me this month. I decided since Royal Rumble is right around the corner that I would do a couple of reviews Royal Rumble related. And what I decided to do is to review my two favorite Royal Rumbles in WWE history. Now, if you've been listening to some of my commentaries lately, in one of them I did mention which two Royal Rumbles were my favorite. So if you heard that, you're probably going to know which one I'm going to do next. If you didn't hear it, I guess it will be a surprise. I'm going to let this review simmer for a week or two, and I will get the other review up before this year's Royal Rumble on the 25th. But today we're going to talk about 1992's Royal Rumble. For a very long time, I considered this to be my favorite Royal Rumble ever, and I gotta say, I have changed my mind. Another Royal Rumble just barely ekes it out, and we'll talk about that one in a couple of weeks, but for the longest time, 1992 was my favorite, for a lot of reasons. Number one was the Royal Rumble match itself, I believe was probably the most star-studded Royal Rumble in WWE history. There's been some good ones, but 1992 was amazing. Just look at the names that are flashing on the screen here. This is a fucking who's who right here, and I really enjoyed this Royal Rumble for that reason, and of course the whole Ric Flair storyline tying into it I thought was great, and I can't wait to talk about this here in a little bit. But the Royal Rumble emanated from Albany, New York at the Knickerbocker Arena. This was on January 19th of 1992. A lot of things were going on in the WWE storyline-wise during this time as well, which is why I like this Royal Rumble so much, because even the undercard, we had some significant shit go down. Now, the opening match is a great one. In typical WWE fashion back in the day, a lot of times they would start out these pay-per-views with pretty much meaningless matches, but also very entertaining matches with some of WWE's more energetic, faster, quicker, high-flying type of wrestlers. And in the opening match here, you had the Orient Express, managed by Mr. Fuji, taking on the New Foundation. And they brought in Jim the Anvil Neidhart to, basically reform a new tag team since Bret was off on singles now doing stuff on the IC title level. They brought back in Jim Neidhart and teamed him up with Owen, which I thought was a great idea. I just hated their gimmick and their look. I mean, for the time, for 1992, their outfit and their very bright neon fluorescent colors, very 90s, very in for the time, I suppose, but they weren't even using Owen Hart's Rocket theme song that he had used for so long. They were using some other bullshit that I couldn't stand. And like I said, the ring attire was atrocious. I mean, even for 1992 standards, even though that sort of thing was in, it still just looked like shit. I would have had no problem at all with them sort of keeping with the same theme of the Hart Foundation. Maybe Owen could have just moved into Bret Hart's role. Now, they can't be the same team and wear the same shit, but kind of keep it similar. And plus, the Hart Foundation was such an over tag team, one of my favorites of all time, probably my favorite tag team of all time in the WWE. I would have loved to see these guys try to recreate something like that with a new team, and it's Bret's brother. So it's a shame that the tag team never amounted to anything. To me, they just weren't really that exciting, but in the ring they were. And like all WWE matches on this level at this time that opened up a pay-per-view, the crowd was very much into it. And the wrestlers were doing, a lot of high spots and shit like that in the match to really get the crowd going, get them ready for the show, get them jacked up. I mean, Owen Hart and Jim Neidhart, after they beat the Orient Express, got a huge pop. They were using at the time their finisher, which I think Owen just climbs to the top rope and Anvil launches him off. It didn't really look that great, but the crowd popped hard for it, and the New Foundation won. It was a great way to start off the Royal Rumble. And actually, I don't even remember seeing these two teams really after this event. If you fast forward to WrestleMania 8, Owen Hart was in a singles match, I think against Steve Kern. What was he, Skinner back then? The Orient Express, I think, ended up going to WCW. I do remember them being there around 1994. I don't think they were using the Orient Express name. And it was this version. It was Tanaka and Kato. Kato was Paul Diamond, who had also teamed with Tanaka under a different name, Bad Company. And when the original Orient Express came in with Sato and Tanaka, managed by Mr. Fuji, I can't remember why Sato left. I don't know if his contract was up or he just decided to leave WWE. But they had Paul Diamond, who I think was already on the roster. They just put a mask on him and teamed him up with Tanaka, since they were a tag team anyway, and they finished up the Orient Express run with those two guys. And with the New Foundation, I can't remember why that team didn't go any further, but I would assume it had something to do with Jim Neidhart. I think he got fired. But overall, a very solid and exciting opening match for the Royal Rumble. The second match on the card, I think, is one of my favorite Royal Rumble matches ever. Anytime you have an Intercontinental title change at the Royal Rumble, it's money. It always has been. And this one was no different. This was so fun and unique to see, and something that you didn't expect to see. Let me just set the stage for you really quick. A couple of days before the Royal Rumble, at a house show, they decided to take the Intercontinental title off of Bret Hart and give it to the Mountie, Jacques Rougeau. They announced the title change, I think, on the weekend shows of WWE right before the Royal Rumble. Actually, I'm not even sure if they got a chance to announce it. I actually don't remember. And it was really odd that they would do this at a house show. They had done this a time or two before. I remember SummerSlam 1994, 2 years later. They did the same thing. Shawn Michaels and Diesel beat the Head Shrinkers at a house show 2 days before SummerSlam. And they ended up having to announce the title change at the beginning of the show. Fans didn't even fucking know. This, I think, took place a few days before. WWE might have had a chance to inform the fans about it, but the notice was very short. I think a lot of people didn't even know that the Mountie won the Intercontinental title. But Bret Hart, apparently, storyline-wise, had a 104-degree temperature. He had the flu. Doctors advised him not to wrestle, but he wanted to defend the title anyway because, of course, he's a fighting champion. He goes in the ring anyway against doctor's orders, ends up losing the Intercontinental title to the Mountie. Then after the match, the Mountie starts beating the shit out of him with the belt. Piper then does a run-in and makes the save, ends up driving the Mountie away and tending to Bret Hart, and that sets up the Mountie defending the Intercontinental title against Roddy Piper at the Royal Rumble just a couple of days later. Now, this was highly interesting to me because Roddy Piper had never held a title in the WWE. I rarely even remember him getting title shots other than his matches with Hulk Hogan in the mid-'80s. And I guess this was all done because the WWE wanted to have a Roddy Piper versus Bret Hart match at WrestleMania. Again, another one of my favorite matches in WrestleMania history. So first, they got to get the title on Hot Rod, and I'm guessing they just used the Mountie to do that. He was able to upset Bret Hart in the flu match. Piper comes out and makes the save, sets up the match between the two of them at the Royal Rumble, and Roddy Piper gets in the ring with the Mountie and makes pretty short work of him. Mountie had a little bit of offense, but not much. Piper ended up beating him with the sleeper. Mountie went out almost instantly. It was fucking hilarious. Ref lifts his arms up once, twice, 3 times. That's it. Ring the bell. Brand new Intercontinental Champion, and I'll never forget the pop he got. The fans, the fucking roof blew off that place. Piper was over as shit. And he was also going to be competing in the Royal Rumble match later on. He had a chance to win 2 titles this night, and it really made for a nice side story. And he was a sleeper. I actually thought he had a legitimate chance to win the Royal Rumble match. But I'll never forget that sight that you guys are seeing right now of Piper holding up the Intercontinental title with that huge-ass smile on his face. It was like, wow, I mean, Roddy Piper finally is a champion in the WWE. It's like 10 years overdue. Or 8 years overdue, anyway. It was so nice to see Roddy Piper win the Intercontinental title. I thought that was such a cool decision, because I was always a Piper fan, and to see him win the title like that was fucking amazing. And it was also great because it set up an incredible babyface match for the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania between Roddy Piper and Bret Hart. The Mountie was, my God. Jacques Rougeau, I gotta say, though, I mean, if they say, we want you to go out there and be a Mountie, and be this asshole, he did a very good job. As a matter of fact, the promo that he cut before his match with Piper was actually pretty good. For him to play that character, that over-the-top Mountie character, he did it brilliantly. Jacques Rougeau is a very underrated promo. I mean, when you go back and watch, and actually Piper had a great promo as well. They both did. Each one of them got a pre-match promo, and they were both hilarious and highly entertaining. And the Mountie was pretty good. Remember when he went to jail at SummerSlam the previous year and he was freaking out? I mean, Jacques Rougeau was pretty good at that stuff. Never still one of my favorite characters or wrestlers. I'm glad he didn't hold on to the Intercontinental title for too long. But that Mountie character, even though it was a stupid character, Jacques Rougeau did a good job with it. Also, too, I forgot to mention, remember how he used to carry around that cattle prod? Well, after the match, after Piper beats him, Piper gets his hands on it, gets his hands on the shocker, and I guess he shocks the Mountie. Now, I happened to be watching at the time the Coliseum video version when I was kind of reliving this pay-per-view to do this review. I have the original pay-per-view version as well. I should take a look at it, but you can obviously tell that the WWE dubbed in this, like, shocking noise or the sound effect when Piper was sticking the Mountie with the cattle prod. It was pretty fucking funny. I was like, oh my God, this is so hokey. I cannot remember if they did that on the live pay-per-view version or not. They probably did not. Now, I'm not going to give the worst match on the card really that much attention, but I do want to mention that the Beverly brothers took on the Bushwhackers with Jameson. Remember that fucking guy, that weird-ass fucking nerd that showed up on Primetime Wrestling? I had kind of forgotten about him. And then he showed back up on WWE TV and started hanging out with the Bushwhackers and feuding with the genius who was managing the Beverly Brothers. I think they had a whole bunch of stupid shit take place between the two of them on TV. The Beverly Brothers ended up beating the Bushwhackers in this match. And then at the end, they got their hands on the genius, and Jameson came in the ring and, like, kicked him in his ass, and he went through the ropes and fell out to the outside. It was awful. Never really was a big fan of the Jameson character. It just speaks volumes to the WWE's over-the-top overthinking of a character or a gimmick or something like that. Jameson is supposed to be some sort of a nerd, so of course he's got the taped up glasses, but he's also a mess. He doesn't know how to fucking dress. His clothes are all mangled and fucked up looking. He stinks. He's dirty. He's gross. A lot of nerds who are smart, and are not like athletic and just read books and learn about things, they're not dirty and gross and have fucking boogers in their nose. They know how to goddamn clean themselves. It's like they couldn't decide if they wanted this guy to be homeless or to be a nerd. He was almost like somewhere in between, and it made no fucking sense. I just hated Jameson. Everything always has to be so over the top and overdone with the WWE. Like Henry Godwinn, remember him when he was just wrestling singles before he was teamed up with Phineas or whatever? I mean, even his initials had to be H-O-G. They had to be Hog, Henry O. Godwinn. He had to carry around a fucking bucket of slop with him. As if you're a pig farmer, everywhere you go in the world, you're carrying around a bucket of slop. When a pig farmer goes to the grocery store or goes out to dinner or goes to a family reunion, he's carrying a fucking bucket of slop with him. It's so goddamn stupid. And Jameson is one of those characters in the early 90s that just personally irked me and I never liked. So, that's a little Jameson rant for you. Who would have thought Good Mic Work would ever do a rant on Jameson? In another match that I was not a huge fan of, the tag team titles were on the line. Legion of Doom, Animal, and Hawk. They had been tag team champions since SummerSlam when they defeated the Nasty Boys. They were taking on another Jimmy Hart tag team, the Natural Disasters, Earthquake and Typhoon. Now, Earthquake and Typhoon, I believe, were on the verge of turning babyface. They were still a heel team at this time. However, they were building them to look a little bit tougher. And in this match in particular, they won. They won via disqualification. Now, the match was not that good. These are two very big, beefy tag teams. And it's very hard when you're the Road Warriors, when you're big, powerful guys, to really move and toss around the Natural Disasters like you did to your other opponents. So it kind of just limited what they could do. You definitely didn't see typical Legion of Doom stuff in this match. Their opponents were just too big, and it ended with a terrible brawl on the outside of the ring. And I think Typhoon or Earthquake, one of them got back in the ring at the last minute. Referee called for the bell. Legion of Doom wound up losing. However, they still retained their WWE Tag Team titles because it ended via disqualification. Now, Jimmy Hart and the Natural Disasters are jumping all around the ring, celebrating like they don't know the fucking rules. Jimmy Hart, I think, even has the belt. He's jumping up and down. We won, we won. How long have you been a manager, Jimmy Hart? How long have these fuckers been wrestling? Do they not understand that when you win a match via disqualification, you don't win the belts? I think Animal and Hawk end up getting back in the ring. They fight off the Natural Disasters, get their belts back, even their music plays, and they walk off. So really nothing was settled there, and I think this was just a way they were starting to move Natural Disasters into a babyface role. So I guess they just didn't want to have them lose to the Legion of Doom, which is fine, but this idea that they didn't know they weren't tag team champions, I couldn't stand. Anyways, now let's get on to the big match. That's the reason we're all here. For the first time ever, the Royal Rumble winner actually gets a prize, and it's a big prize. The WWE title had been held up. If you remember, at Survivor Series 1991, the Hulk Hogan versus Undertaker match, with interference from Ric Flair, had the Undertaker tombstone Hulk Hogan onto a chair and win the WWE title right there in the Joe Louis Arena. One of my favorite moments ever in wrestling. After the show, everybody, including Mean Gene, is freaking out. What a miscarriage of justice. They bring on Jack Tunney, who makes an announcement that, yes, we do have a new WWE champion. Unfortunately, his hands are tied. The referee's decision is final. Undertaker is the new WWE champion. However, what he can do is set up a rematch at the earliest possible date. And that's when they did this funny Tuesday pay-per-view. It was called This Tuesday in Texas. So you only had the weekend for WWE to promote this pay-per-view as kind of an early form of In Your House. I think they might have been testing things out to see what it would be like to add a small, shorter pay-per-view with just a few matches, maybe for cheaper. I don't remember what they charged for Tuesday in Texas. But why the fuck am I even talking about Tuesday in Texas? I'm trying to talk about the Royal Rumble here, but just setting up the circumstances as to why the WWE title was held up. So they have this pay-per-view, Tuesday in Texas, rematch between The Undertaker and Hulk Hogan. Jack Tunney even sits at ringside. There's all sorts of bullshit that takes place in this match as well. Ric Flair is out there. Hulk Hogan ends up winning back the WWE title with a roll-up or a schoolboy on The Undertaker. That's how he won the belt back. But the whole match was a huge clusterfuck. So what WWE president Jack Tunney decides to do is say, since this match was such a mess, forget it. We just have no WWE champion. The title is vacated. We're going to crown an undisputed champion in 2 months at the Royal Rumble. The winner of the Royal Rumble match will become the new WWE champion, period. That's the way we're doing it. I thought that was awesome for the time. I loved the suspense because you had 2 full months with no WWE champion there, and you could speculate as to who you think would win. You just had The Undertaker and Hulk Hogan fighting for the title. You would think one of those two guys would be the odds-on favorite, but you got this brand new, self-professed, real world's champion, legendary wrestler Ric Flair that had just come up from the NWA after dominating, the National Wrestling Alliance for so many years. Now he's in the WWE. You got fucking Sid Vicious also in the WWE. Macho Man Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, just a ton of contenders in this match. So you were wondering which way it was going to go. Now, as you get into the Royal Rumble and as they build for this, they announced that The Undertaker and Hulk Hogan, since technically they both won the WWE title during that span there after Survivor Series, they were going to get some preferential treatment, and they would get to draw from the numbers between 15 and 30. So that right there, made you think that it could be one of those two guys that would win it, or it would come down to those two guys in the ring at the end. And I think, to me, that's what makes Ric Flair's victory in this match that much more impressive, is that he came up from the South. He was only in WWE for a couple of months before this match. He goes in there, and not only does he beat 29 other guys, he beats 29 fucking huge WWE stars. Not all of them, I understand that, but the majority of the people in that Royal Rumble, there were some mega names in this match. And for Flair to overcome all those odds, as an outsider coming into Vince's promotion and Vince's territory and win a match like that, that was a great way to launch him. I mean, even all the mid-carders that were in this match were still huge stars. We saw British Bulldog in this match, Ted DiBiase, Shawn Michaels, incidentally. Now, the Rockers had just split up like a week or two before the show. So this was our very first look at HBK, our very first look at this new Shawn Michaels character, the way he was now dressing differently. He was a chick magnet. He was this cocky, arrogant, gum-chewing asshole that he did so well right off the bat. Shawn Michaels was great at this character, even when he was in the Rockers, even when they were teasing the split. And Shawn Michaels started, kind of just talking to the fans on the outside of the ring, just walking around cocky-like and sitting up in the corner like he didn't give a fuck. He was starting that even as early as when he was with the Rockers when they were first splitting, and he just did it brilliantly. So I think I'll always remember this Royal Rumble for that reason as well, as this was kind of the birth of Shawn Michaels. This was the first time we saw him outside of that Rockers environment, and it was awesome. This was a highly exciting and very nail-biting Royal Rumble match. I remember watching this live on pay-per-view and just being on the edge of my seat watching this shit. And I just want to touch on a few of my memories from the match itself. There was a lot of interesting things. I loved some of the timing of some of the wrestlers coming in. The guy that drew number one actually was the British Bulldog. The guy that drew number two was Ted DiBiase. Now, these are two huge WWE stars. What I found interesting is Ted DiBiase got eliminated in the first minute. He might have been injured or something like that. A name like Ted DiBiase, to have him in there in the Royal Rumble throughout this thing would have just been, another name, another huge name in there. So he got eliminated really early. And the British Bulldog was actually in there by himself. It already eliminated the first guy and was standing there waiting for number three. And who is number three? Ric Flair. It was so perfect. The buzzer went off. The camera is focused right on the curtain. Ric Flair comes busting through, and Bobby Heenan loses his shit. And I gotta say, Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon made this match for me. Their commentary during this thing, especially Bobby Heenan, the way he was freaking out over Ric Flair. He was literally, I think, standing up, pacing back and forth while he was doing commentary. He was sweating bullets. He was losing his mind. And just to listen to him go through all of these different ranges of emotion throughout the match for a solid hour. You're listening to Bobby the Brain Heenan call things from a Ric Flair perspective. It was so entertaining, and it was one of the things that stands out and that I remember about this match more than anything else. And when you combine that with the great chemistry that he has with Gorilla Monsoon, I mean, how many times do you think he said, "Will you stop," at Bobby the Brain Heenan during this match? I swear to you, like 100. He was constantly telling Bobby Heenan to shut the fuck up and calm down and relax. I mean, it was hilarious. So I have to give a ton of credit for the success of this particular match to Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. They did a fantastic job calling this thing. I also liked a few of the interesting showdowns throughout the match. Shawn Michaels, who I just mentioned earlier on, I think he drew number 16, and he came in the ring and had a small run-in with Ric Flair. They had a little scuffle there, and it was very good stuff. Now, Shawn Michaels had put on a very good showing against Ric Flair when he was still a rocker, right near the end of their run, right before his heel turn. I think he wrestled Flair on, I think it was Wrestling Challenge or Superstars or something like that, and they had a great match. It was probably one of my favorite television matches that I can remember remember seeing just on an ordinary show like that. I mean, if you can look it up on YouTube, I'm sure it might be on there somewhere. I'm not sure. But if you can find it, take a look at it, because it's an amazing match between those two guys. And you could see, I mean, Flair was still the man back then, and to be wrestling a young Shawn Michaels, I mean, they put on a hell of a show. And then here, they had one of their only run-ins, ever in the WWE before working together many, many years later. So to see these all-time legends working together 23 years ago is pretty cool. I also remember really liking when the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, came out, because Ric Flair was in the ring. And for an old NWA fan like myself, I mean, that match between the two of them at Texas Stadium when Kerry Von Erich won the NWA title from Ric Flair with the backslide is a memory that I've just always treasured. I've just really always liked and enjoyed that match, even though, Kerry Von Erich was nothing great. They only gave him the belt because his brother died, but still, it was a good match. They packed that place out. It was a pretty big crowd for the NWA. And for Kerry Von Erich to beat Ric Flair like that was pretty memorable. And those guys had a little run-in in this Royal Rumble. When Texas Tornado came out to the ring, Ric Flair stood right there in the middle and fucking waited for him. It was so awesome. I mean, Ric Flair, who had already been in the Rumble for close to a half an hour by this point, actually longer than a half an hour, here he is standing there waiting to challenge this guy as he comes into the ring fresh. And I got to admit, Ric Flair's performance in this match was incredible, because he kept fighting. Even Gorilla Monsoon on commentary was giving Ric Flair a ton of credit. This guy could be hiding or cowering in the corner or simply doing whatever he has to do to survive. Instead, he's out there taking it to people. He's the one starting fights, and it was just an amazing performance by Ric Flair. There was even a great spot about midway through the match when the ring starts really filling up with a lot of guys, a lot of mid-carders, Herculeses and, Barbarians and Haku and Nikolai Volkovs, people like that. They're all in there together. The ring is kind of swelling up, and then all of a sudden, one by one, they start going out really quickly. And what ends up happening is Ric Flair is in there all by himself, waiting for the next guy to come down. And of course, I remember when this clock was counting down, I had a friend over. He was watching the pay-per-view with me. We were jumping up and down. We were screaming, "It's gotta be Piper. Piper, please let it be Piper." And sure enough, as soon as the buzzer goes off, fucking Piper comes busting through those fucking curtains. Ric Flair shits his pants. Bobby the Brain Heenan loses his mind. He's freaking out. Piper gets in the ring and just absolutely beats the piss out of Ric Flair. These guys were already feuding, because when Ric Flair came into the WWE with the NWA World title, Piper, who was doing commentary at the time, took offense to that. And those guys had a huge run-in. I think it was on one of the shows, Funeral Parlor or whatever the fuck, and they did some matches on the house show circuit and the tours, and they were rekindling a feud that they had in the NWA here in WWE. And Piper, I remember just being livid that Ric Flair was coming into the WWE claiming he's the real world's champion. Piper spit on the NWA World title belt. These guys had a pretty heated rivalry, so when Piper came out there as the new Intercontinental champion, a guy that has a chance to win 2 titles tonight, Ric Flair has already been in there for God knows how long. He's already exhausted, and then Piper's coming in there like a madman to kick his ass. It was fucking beautiful. And what was interesting, too, is Piper ended up putting Flair in the sleeper. And then the next guy to come out is Jake the Snake Roberts, who's also in a very heated and very violent feud with the Macho Man Randy Savage. Jake Roberts had recently turned heel back at SummerSlam when he turned on the Ultimate Warrior and all of that shit. So he's this dirty asshole. He kind of slithers into the ring and just sits in the corner and just watches Flair and Piper fight. It was pretty awesome. He just kind of picks his spot and waits a few more minutes, and when both guys get their backs turned to him, he attacks Piper, and then, the Rumble match basically starts over, and then guys start getting at it again. Undertaker ended up coming in at number 20, so he's one of the big names that you really thought could win it. We're starting to get those guys in there now. So Taker comes in at number 20, gets in there and just starts cleaning house like Taker always does. Savage ends up coming out right after him, so Savage comes out at number 21. Of course, he goes right after Jake the Snake Roberts, and in an interesting spot. It's one of these things, it reminds me of cage matches too, how the WWE constantly changes the rules on these things. Sometimes you have to pin your opponent in the cage, which is actually the way it should be, the way it was done years and years and years ago, and sometimes you have to escape the cage. So the WWE has changed shit up from time to time, and in the Royal Rumble was no different. Savage, of course, runs out there. He's fucking livid at Jake the Snake Roberts. They're fighting all over the ring. Finally, he gets his hands on him, throws him, and eliminates him out of the ring, and then does the Savage top rope jump, where he grabs the ropes and leaps over to the outside. So he basically eliminated himself. But I don't think he was supposed to. He was supposed to remain in the match. So you hear Gorilla and Bobby trying to cover for this. well, I think you have to be propelled out. And Bobby Heenan's like, yeah. So I bet you they're on headset backstage, and Vince is probably telling them what to explain to the audience, because you hear Bobby Heenan saying, oh, wait, I know what it is. He goes, I think somebody has to throw you out. You can't eliminate yourself. Where I remember just like 2 years prior to this, Andre the Giant eliminated himself when Jake the Snake Roberts came out with the snake, threw it in the ring, and Andre just fucking jumped over the top rope and got out of there. There's been a few instances like that. Didn't Drew Carey even eliminate himself? So I thought if you have to be thrown out, Andre should have remained in the Royal Rumble. Drew Carey should have remained in the Royal Rumble, and God knows how many other guys that have been eliminated like this. It's kind of funny how they just have to change and tweak the rules to, fit their circumstances. And Savage might have, he botched that. I don't think he was supposed to jump over the rope. Hogan comes in pretty late. I believe he was 25 or 26. He comes in there really late and ends up eliminating The Undertaker, which I just fucking hated. I would have liked to see Taker be one of the last guys in there, but whatever. Sid Justice, he gets the best pick. He's number 29. So this guy who's huge, who Vince loves, Vince always wanted to get Sid from WCW. I think he loved him. He loved his look. He is definitely a Vince McMahon guy. Sid, for back in the day, man, he was pretty fucking intimidating. He was an awesome specimen, and I just thought he was over, and he was always money. I love Sid. Wasn't a huge fan of his name. They had to change it to Justice, but, whatever. He was definitely one of the favorites to win the Royal Rumble, and he did not even get the preferential treatment that Hogan and Taker got, and he still drew number 29. So for storyline purposes, this guy is pretty lucky, and why he didn't win this thing, I have no fucking idea. But the finish was great. The Final Four did turn out to be great. The Final Four was Hogan, Savage, Flair, and Sid. Savage ends up getting dumped over, I think, when Sid's got him hanging off, and I think Flair just kind of pushes him over. Hogan and Flair then start to fight. Hogan's got Flair in the corner. He's trying to eliminate him. Sid kind of looks around and says, well, here we go. He walks right up behind Hogan and fucking dumps him out. I remember being pretty happy. I actually wanted a fresh face to win the title, and at this point in the match, I actually thought it might be Sid. But in typical Hulk Hogan fashion, I mean, this is something that always cracks me up about Hulk Hogan. Even when he's a babyface, do you realize he is the biggest fucking sore loser in fucking wrestling history? Every time he loses or gets cheated or something, he acts like the biggest baby, with the exception of the time he gave the belt to the Warrior and gave him a hug. That was nice. But I remember when Andre beat him with the twin referees. I mean, not even 4-year-old little baby girls scream and yell and whine the way Hulk Hogan was whining that night. It was fucking ridiculous. And here, he gets eliminated in the Royal Rumble in a totally non-illegal way. That is the rules. Every man for him fucking self. It's on the goddamn pay-per-view poster, Hulk Hogan, and you don't understand that? You didn't know enough to keep your head on a swivel and know that people are always coming for you, and you had your back turned and you were against the ropes in a vulnerable position, and you're pissed that somebody came along and took advantage of that? Sid Justice didn't cheat. He eliminated your red and yellow ass fair and fucking square, and you acted like a goddamn baby, and he grabbed a hold of Sid's arm, starts yanking on it. Ric Flair from behind scoops up Sid, dumps him over the top rope, and wins the WWE title. Bobby the Brain Heenan's head exploded. It was a great finish, and it set up Hogan and Sid for WrestleMania. Sid now, I guess, is a heel. Or he would be a heel. It would take him another month, I think, to turn. I think him and Hogan would eventually make up, and they would form that tag team on the big main event, the NBC special or whatever. That's when they would do the turn with Sid. But it's funny that Sid turned out to be the heel in this thing when it was Hogan was the one that illegally eliminated Sid. And yet Sid's the bad guy. It's just something looking back now, 23 years later, you kind of laugh at. The logic doesn't make sense, but I love the finish. It was awesome to see Ric Flair have that performance. The decision to make him number 3, I think, was brilliant in this, because that's what you had to do with Flair. That's what you had to showcase. You had to make these fans who maybe weren't familiar with Flair get familiar with Flair real quick. And you had to showcase his ability to wrestle and to have hour-long matches, which he was very capable of doing. A lot of the WWE stars, Hogan and Warrior and even Sid and Taker and guys like that, they really weren't capable of having an hour-long match. Flair was one of those guys that could really showcase his ring ability and how he can entertain you in the ring, and they brought him in. Great performance in that Royal Rumble. I loved, like Gorilla said, like Bobby the Brain Heenan said, he kept taking it to people. He was fighting the whole time, and he was a heel. You know, he was almost working this match, wrestling this match as a babyface. He was putting on the type of performance that a babyface would put on, you know, trying to survive, eliminating guys, you know, fighting tooth and nail to survive after drawing such an early number. It was just beautiful to watch. And I thought it was really cool. I mean, I was still really shocked, and I still wasn't even used to the fact that Ric Flair was even in the WWE to begin with. To me, that was amazing enough. To me, that my eyes were seeing the NWA title on a WWF television program at that time, you know, back on the USA Network in 1991, fucking blew me the fuck walk away. So the whole idea of Flair even being with the WWE was still new to me, and now he wins the WWE title. It was fucking great. And who can forget the backstage press conference afterwards? Jack Tunney's got the title. Mean Gene's back there. Bobby Heenan has now left the commentary booth to join them with Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair. They've got members of the press there. You can see the flash bulbs. I think Mean Gene even yells at somebody to put that cigarette out or put that cigar out or whatever. It was fucking great. And with WWE trying to go maybe in a different direction at this time because the scandals were starting to kick in, the steroid stuff, you know, some of those accusations were starting to come around. The WWE, I think, was downsizing a little bit. Hulk Hogan was about to leave for a year. So they were going to focus more on guys like Ric Flair and his feud with Randy Savage. Great WrestleMania match that year. Of course, dropping the belt later on to Bret Hart, and the company basically going in a completely different direction, you know, by a year later. So this one for me really ranks up there. Just an amazing Royal Rumble match. I mean, for the longest time, like I said, it was my favorite Royal Rumble match, but there's one other one that I liked just a tiny bit better. But it's really hard to argue, you know, with this one because, I mean, the names alone, you guys saw the 30 participants in this thing, you know, amazing stars that were in this Royal Rumble. One of my favorites of all time. Amazing performance by Ric Flair, great storyline and great storytelling by Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. I loved this pay-per-view, absolutely amazing. If you have never seen it, check it the fuck out. I'm sure you can find it somewhere, maybe on YouTube, and of course, if you're a WWE Network subscriber for $9.99, it's right up there for you to see. Check it out, and it's one of those Royal Rumble matches that you can actually watch and stay entertained from start to finish. Some other Royal Rumbles, you can't really say that. If you fast forward through a lot, you don't give a fuck about a lot of it, but this is one that you can watch straight through and be entertained pretty much the entire time. So that is it for my latest installment of my pay-per-view and DVD reviews. Again, I want to thank everyone out there for your support, and check out my page in the next week or two. I will have another Royal Rumble review up, and that one will be a lot of fun as well. I will talk to you all very soon. Until next time, peace.